we're working on in the department, thinking about maintaining relevancy with our systems and other options that could be out there, developing our way ahead. So first, a little background, kind of our read on our current situation concerning our licensing is the current environment. You know, we're anticipating, we've been kind of flush with PRDJ money for the past few years, but what happens if that declines? So do we need to prepare and anticipate for a decline in PRDJ funding? Yet to be seen, but those are the indicators that are out there from some articles from Department of Interior and NPR had an article. So I tried to take one from each end of the spectrum and kind of see where it was. So there could be anticipated declining revenues. There could be increased expectations from the public. That's certainly ongoing, whether it's with enforcement or habitat management, the ease and convenience of licensing issuance, management, protection of both game and non-game access, all those issues that this commission deals with on a day-to-day basis. There's also an expectation to keep up with technology and a lot of the pace of operations, the pace of technological development, and of course our focus on that is for improved customer experience, whether it's being able to apply online or apply through obtain a license or license selling agent, whatever that is. We want that to be timely, responsive, and accurate as we manage wildlife. So kind of a background piece there. Another point is the issue of programming capacity in the game and fish. So I just took a real brief time slice analysis based on the number of we call them IT tickets. But basically all that is, hey, if we need a programming change to due to an updated regulation or due to a process or we had a bug glitch or something like that, then our folks that work with our licensing system could put in an IT ticket that goes to our super smart programmer people and IT folks. So I just took a slice in time and looked at it. Hey, as of today, what does this look like? On any given week, our programmers that we have are expending 95% of their programming time towards 30% of those open IT tickets. 70%, they're tracked, but they're not actively being worked at any given time. So they've got to work through the higher priorities. And, if you've got like a bug fix that's going to crash, then that's obviously going to affect the priority list. The bug fix needs to go to the top, and then something else is bumped down. So we have a limited number of programmers and a defined capacity. So I found that interesting in the programming world for the department. So
Mr. President, great.
Just,
You should have a monstrous backlog.
we Mr. President, Commissioner Crank, our programmers have a lot of work stacked up. Well, the time slice that I pulled was just for 1 week last month. So it depends on the item that they're trying to fix. Some are quick fixes, some aren't. But just for that week, 70% of those open tickets weren't being touched because our programmers were fully engaged in solving that other 30%.
If that's accurate, then it isn't. That's like a compound interest question these days. It just keeps growing every day. If you only get 30% of the work done on any given day, the next day you have 100% of the work plus the 70 you didn't get done the day before. That's accurate. We need to address it.
Mr. President, members of the commission, Commissioner Crank, it is accurate. So we're in the process right now of evaluating a few programs in the department. That's one of our highest priorities right now is our IT program. So director's office is working with Dee and the programmers and the supervisors of that program right now to go into a very thorough evaluation of workload, capacity, and demands on the programming needs. So we're going to address it.
Can be done by July when we pass our budget.
Not sure if it will be done by July, but that probably doesn't matter. You can add to your budget at any time during the year.
I'll drive on, Mr. President. So it's this whole issue of problem identification, which Deputy Director Kennedy actually stated that we are working on that. But how do we increase our programmer capacity to address more new application developments? So in our current environment, how do we morph that to get after technology developments for the ease of customer use? How do we keep up with the basic technology? One way, and there's many national conferences, and I believe some members of the commission have attended some of those. There's a lot of contractors out there that provide different licensing services to wildlife management agencies. And as this states, hey, 60% of states have engaged with these contractors to some degree for a lot of their licensing costs. So it could be with harvest surveys, rarely licensed draws, but that is an option. They have, electronic purchasing systems and as well as issuance and application systems. So there are contractors out there that can specialize in this. So we looked at this is how are we going to move the department forward on this? So looking at, how do we develop and modernize our current systems? And then what are those key tasks? Let's go ahead and explore these software solutions that are out there that many contractors provide. How are they doing it? How are we doing it? What can we do as compared to what can they do? What levels of control and responsibility would be advocated, or whatever that looks like. Let's build those options, and then let's decide what capabilities and features that we want for our license, our licensing operations, and then let's make sure we take a deliberate approach. We don't want to rush to failure, So let's weigh risk as we go and take a look, and then let's assess and evaluate each step to keep that risk low and make sure those opportunities are going to be feasible, suitable, acceptable, and complete for our stuff. So really all this is saying is let's take a long-term approach and a deliberate approach to any solutions that we may consider. And our desired end state is obviously our improved customer experience in getting after this issue. So the staff approach that we've been working is what are the minor changes that we can take a look at? Again, keep risk low. Let's consider cost to the customers, cost to the department. Are we improving customer communication? Are we maintaining the security requirements associated with any technological system? And then, oh, by the way, we've got the federal state commission requirements that are out there as well. Let's make sure we're hitting those things. So in looking at that, we decided to kind of eat this elephant one bite at a time. So the first piece that we looked at is, hey, let's pursue some sort of technological change with watercraft registration, that we have. So staff did a lot of work on developing a request for purchase for a watercraft registration solution. That happened during 2018. And currently, the request for purchase is still open. It's not closed yet, so it's out there. So we should be getting those responses back from potential contractors this summer. I believe around June time. Yeah, well, there it is right there. We'll receive that feedback back, and that'll give us an idea into these things up here. You know, what's the cost and those other factors.
Mr. President, Greg, what are we purchasing? What are we proposing to purchase?
Mr. President, Commissioner Crank, we're taking a look at a contractor run system that can handle all of our watercraft registration tasks out of the licensing section.
Looking at outsourcing.
Yes, sir.
Yes, I mean, you kind of have to bear with me, and it's not ready for today, but at some stage, I think you should tell the commission how many registrations, registrations we do every year, how many personnel are dedicated to that, what's the cost associated with that. That's compared to the cost to outsource.
Mr. President, Commissioner Crank, you're absolutely correct, and I don't have those numbers in front of me right now.
I'm not asking.
But I'll get after that. I do have some of that coming up in a follow-on briefing concerning the commissioner orientation later this year. So this is kind of our first bite of the elephant, right here, concerning watercraft registration. So that's this phase one is this watercraft piece, and it'll develop through this summer and fall, and at some point we're going to reach a decision point, and can we implement that decision, or are we going to go back to the drawing board? And that kind of gets at phase two. So if it's awarded, then how do we need to develop our systems? How much programming is going to be taken to pull that off between us and the contractor to get a system in place, and as much as possible enhance that customer experience and keep any of those transitional changes impervious to the customer. If it's not awarded, then we'll continue our staff development options and reset our planning timetable. If we do come out of systems development and then we get into the implementation and assessment piece. Is this thing really doing what we thought it would do? Are we gaining efficiencies through implementation? Did it hit our return on investment ratios like we thought it would, or not? And as well as customer experience. So that's kind of where we're at with licensing modernization pieces. And for that, I'll stand for any further questions.
Am I reading you right? It seems to me like what you're trying to say is the Game and Fish Department is reaching a tipping point. Whether or not we have the capacity in-house to handle all this information and technology regarding license sales and other issues in the department, as is shown by your backlog of programming. Are we reaching a point where we have to decide what we stay in-house, can afford to do in-house, whether we need to expand more programming or go outside something else? Is that what we're saying?
Mr. President and Commissioner Doobie, I think that I'm not necessarily sure I would say we're at a tipping point in the department, but we are looking for ways to constantly improve. And we do know that there's solutions out there that we've seen other states employ. And, you know, there could be a better way to do our business where we could gain some efficiencies and, you know, alleviate workload on some of our employees, but we don't know what that is. It could just, you know, it could run the gamut from, hey, we need to expand our capacity in the programming, you know, capacity that we currently have in the department, or it could be, hey, there's on the other end of the spectrum, there's an opportunity to do, you know, a full scale outsourcing option? The answer is probably going to be somewhere in the middle. But you know, one of the things I've noticed in the department is there's this continual passion for improvement, and you know, how can we make it better? And really, that's where I feel we are in answer to your question.
What's your preference? Are you leaning towards competitive bid to possibly outsource this, or RFQ, request for quotation? What's the anticipated process?
Well, Mr. President, I'm maintaining objectivity through this whole thing, in order to get to, you know, the best solution possible. But but currently, you know, with the phases that I agreed that you know, the first bite of that elephant would be that request for yeah, that request is out there and it's open, and we should. So that's the first bite of the elephant is my read. Right?
The reason I bring this up, Greg, is past few summers I've been in winter, mid-year and year-end walkway. Talking to some of the other states, they are outsourcing everything.
Yes, so Mr. President, we've actually had a company or two, can't remember for sure if we've had two. We've had some of these companies come and talk to us and show us what they may be able to do with our entire licensing system. And really, we weren't comfortable jumping in with both feet. And so this was kind of a step, as Greg has explained, towards kind of dipping our toe in the water, seeing what we think about having just a very, you know, one component of our licensing system outsourced. And that's really what this RFP that's out there right now is all about, is say, come in, do a bid for us, take on our watercraft registration program, which is much, much less than, there's way far, you know, a lot less watercraft registrations than there is licensed applicants. Let's see how they do. See what, you know, that in Wyoming, the way that we manage the licensing system is as important as sportsmen as it is just about anything we do. And so we need to be very, very cautious here.
And that's why I bring this up too, because previous agenda items were the license selling agent can call you or Jennifer or whoever it may be, and resolve an issue, as well as you guys fix the problem too, possibly. I mean, the more we outsource, the more I believe we loosen our range. So does that make sense? I think the more we do in-house, it becomes more of a personal effort.
Mr. President, I mean, this is outsource licensing, which is one of our basic core functions. Be a huge policy shift. So I think that's something that we can consider, but that's something that the department we need to work very carefully with. Lots of thought, lots of data. That's what we do. We license, and knock on wood, in my 59 years of life, we've never had some kind of major file where something about a movie's license that didn't bring fraud, those kind of things. I think that's because it's been so much, you have to create employees and spend so much control of time on it.
That's a good point.
And these are people that live and work in Wyoming, up here, pay taxes. When you outsource, you're paying someone in Atlanta. So that's a huge policy shift if we're going to go there.
But it's something we have to look at. It's like Commissioner Smith brought up. It's a new day. It's a new technology. We have to advance as well as anything else. But how we arrive at that is determined by us.
I mean, I like the idea of looking at least exploring the option. You know, Wyoming is unique; it may not fit us. wants to change direction for us. I think it's worth looking at.
Absolutely.
And to answer Pat's question, you know, I got this, we get these cool little books, and they got all kinds of great information. And somebody's put a lot of time and effort out there putting this together, so I picked them up one day and started reading through it. But to answer your question, watercraft licenses and everything associated with that stuff, 46,355.
So not insignificant.
No.
That's a lot of work.
That's how many different stamps and things we put out every year for watercraft in the state.
Yes. More questions for Drake?
Mr. President, I don't have a question for Chief Phipps, but from my background, we call them TSPs, technical service providers, and we outsource a lot of engineering work. And what we have found with our limited staff at our local district level is that lets us focus staff on higher priority issues, bigger projects. So I commend you for your continued efforts and efficiencies in trying to move our whole license section forward, and would never lose control over that. But if we had people doing the grunt work, like you gave oversight to, I think that could be very beneficial to you, your limited staff, and focus on other areas of higher priority. So I think it's a good idea. I'll be anxious to see the interest in some of that work.
Thank you.
You know, again, I think what Pat brought up, you know, we outsource this thing, it has to really fit. Like, there's no, gotta be a 9.5 shoe or what, 9.5, and that's it. Because we start outsourcing, and we're outsourcing to somebody in Atlanta, like Pat mentioned. Takes away jobs in Wyoming. I think that needs to be considered too. Anytime we outsource out of state, that's going to take away or not provide a job for somebody. So, and you do lose control. Like it or not, there's always a system in place that allows you to check and recheck, so you don't lose control. There is I go through that process, you don't have to. I think what we have is dynamite, but I think like what Mike brings up, we've got to modernize our system too, and that brings that up. I think that's a feeling of the whole commission. Whatever it has to be. So, that being said.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Doug Brinkmeyer.
Mr. President, members of the Commission, Director Nesvik, I'll get my presentation loaded up here. We'd like to give you a little overview of winter conditions throughout the state and kind of touch on kind of regionally what's going on in those areas and the differences between some of the geographic areas of the state. In general, Wyoming has a pretty good winter. Started off in November. It was pretty mild. Animals were in exceptional condition, body condition, and we were looking at pretty favorable conditions for animal survival over the winter. But once we got into the latter part of February, you can see on this map, this is a snow water equivalent map, and you can see that we were over 110% through much of the very extreme western portion of the state, North Dakota, 100% of normal through much of the central portion of the state. And then Laramie actually took on a lot of snow in the last couple of weeks, and conditions there turned out to be fairly severe just in the last few weeks. Black Hills, again, that's in the 120% range of snow water equivalent. And if you compare that to 2018, last year this time, you can see that conditions were quite a bit more moderate in their severity in terms of the water equivalency and the snow so the amount of water in the snow. Kind of moving along into kind of the different regions. Starting off with Jackson, conditions were similar to the 2016-17 winter. Very deep snow on the valley floor, difficult conditions, especially when you combine with the cold temperatures that they were experiencing. They had some real prolonged cold temperatures. The town of Jackson had generally gets 14 inches of snow. This year it was 3 times that amount during the month of February. And so the depths really built up. A lot of the animals started dropping down into the roadways, and we started to see elevated mortality on our deer, and conditions are still pretty tough there. Overall, we're going to, these trends continue. We're going to continue to see some loss of big game in that part of the state. The Park Service was shutting down the road from Moran to south towards the airport to try and facilitate bison movement. So we had bison that were kind of, once they get into the roadway, they couldn't get off, and they would just come further south, and they actually herded animals south. We started some of our staff went up and tried to move them off of a private ranch, and once they got on the road, the only place they could go was really southward towards the town of Kelly and towards the National Elk Refuge. We did utilize the Chapter 56. The Chapter 56 permit allows us to address damage concerns on a local scale. We had to remove a couple bull elk, a couple bull bison, and a horse herd, and then a couple of cow elk as well. Switching to the Cody region, again, conditions kicked off really mild early in the season, but once we got into February, it was the coldest on record. We have some pretty extended periods of time that temperatures below 0. Threw a couple pictures in here too. This is Tartar Mountain, and this is a herd of elk, so they're almost 2,400 head of elk in this picture. Managers upload this, and then they can put a dot and tally the animals that are within those polygons.
So those are wintering elk.
Yes.
Non-feed ground conditions. And so, kind of area, can you tell us approximately what that area is? The actual size of the areas?
Yeah, the mile is a mile square, or a little more than that.
Oh, more than that. So we have 2,400 elk in the mile square area.
Yeah. I think, Mr. President, Commissioner Crank, a lot of folks would look at that as that those animals have free reign of that entire landscape, and they just kind of mill through it. But
I asked you that question because there's been a lot in the press lately that our feed grounds are concentrating animals, which leads to the spread of CWD. This, I think, shows what naturally occurs without feed grounds. The animals concentrate themselves in an area conducive to have good food for the winter. So,
Excellent.
thank you. And I guess in the region, upper elevations, good snowpack, as we saw in that initial slide that I had, that well over 100% snowpack in higher elevations. And then once you get down into those, valley floor or lower elevations, it's the snow depth's not as bad. They are observing a little bit of fawn mortality throughout the region, but it's nothing outside of the normal of what we typically see. The other two pictures are over, I believe, towards the bighorns. Moving over to the Sheridan region, again, early part of the season, very mild. And once you get in towards the eastern part of the region, towards the Black Hills, pretty significant winter there, and I'll talk a little more about that when we get to the Casper slides, and a few images from some of the flights that the region had conducted. Big game mortality is likely going to be very similar to a normal winter. We did see some moderation here lately, and a lot of that lower elevation foothills have started to melt off peak price. We've seen some of that. Tongue River drainage is about 79% precipitation, or 86% of that, what's normal for moisture content for this time of year. Green River region, a little bit different story down here. It's pretty much winter there. we've had some significant January snowstorms, prolonged cold temperatures. It was average winter conditions, except in that Evanston area, Bridger Valley, and Green River. We're seeing some elevated mortalities. We're seeing just a little bit more damage throughout a lot of those areas, and managers are pretty concerned about some of the big game species, big game animals there. Kevin's study on the south end, Kevin Monteith's study in the south end of the Wyoming range, we've lost 60% of the fawns this year. If you remember in 2017, with that severe winter that we had, we lost all of the radio collared fawns, and when we did our sampling of the broad population, we were at about 95% of the fawns died over there, and about 40% of adults. Kevin's at about 25% of his adults that have lost, and again 60% of the fawns so far. And Kevin's study is really based on trying to follow those generations, so those fawns from one year to the next, and see how they contribute to the population. And the two severe winters, the last couple of years now, it makes it really hard for that study to really get a good track of what production we're going to have on those fawns when we lose so many fawns each year. So, we're kind of in a unique spot where we've got the study in place, and he's continuing to document how things change there. Once you get in a little bit north of Green River, things are actually a little bit better, and the deer are basically in pretty darn good condition. We're not losing as many as we are in the south end here towards Green River. Laramie, as I showed on that first slide, conditions were pretty good once we got into the first half of the winter, but then once we got into March, that substantial March storm that we had just in the last week really changed the water equivalencies in the snow depths. And we're starting to see a little bit of more mortality and some localized damage areas. This was out by Hannah, and then this picture was an aerial survey over at Laramie Peak. And I think this is back again out by towards Elk Mountain, just drifting. Lander region, pretty mild conditions in the lower elevations. Once you get around 8,000 feet around Du Bois, it's pretty open. Lander and Riverton, relatively low snow, but where the snow is deposited, it's pretty crusted over, pretty difficult for animals to forage. But they're going to see some normal mortalities, winter mortality on their big game populations. Rawlins has a lot of winter ranges that are open, and again, there's a little bit of mortality on some of the fawns and the older age animals. And this is near the Jim Bridger power plant, and then this is on what the Beaver Rim, kind of some of the conditions there. Casper region, a pretty broad region, goes from the Black Hills all the way south to Laramie Peak and to the west. And you can see, so this is Newcastle area. And this is kind of the Bates Hole, Shirley Basin. I think Brian and Commissioner Brokaw drove through the Shirley Basin, and it was still pretty white conditions, pretty tough. We're seeing that, for the most part, it's a moderate to severe winter, depending on where you're at in the region. Black Hills, it's bordering on severe. We are going to lose some fawns in the Black Hills. The deer populations there will see a little bit of a loss in recruitment this year. On the other side of that, though, the animals did go into the winter with good body condition, good fat. So the losses probably will be a little bit moderated from that. Last region, Pinedale region, another area that has pretty much winter there. And a lot of the winter ranges look just like the top picture here. Pretty much extensive, continuous snow cover, very little forage sticking up, and a little bit of concern there for the mortality on particularly the young and the older age classes of animals. And forage is, like I said, is pretty limited there. And we are experiencing some fawn mortality. Once you get a little bit south of Pinedale towards Big Piney, things start to get a little bit better in those deer. Dr. Monteith and some of our folks handled a number of deer during the first 2 weeks of March. and those animals were actually in pretty good body condition, better than they've been for a while. And so they're not doing so bad, but this conditions could prolong the availability of forage being there, and so we could see a little bit elevated mortality there. And that concludes that. If you guys have any questions, I'd be happy to provide any clarifications. Thanks.
Thanks, Doug. Okay, next will be Deputy Director Scott. Thanks, Scott.
Mr. President, Commissioners, Director Nesbitt, I'd like to give an update this morning on some of the public outreach that we've conducted here, specifically in the month of February, in regards to the migration corridor. So, as you recall, back on February 11th, we had a statewide gathering in Casper. And again, thanks to all the commissioners that were able to attend that. We had over 60 publics participate in that statewide forum that we held. We had a good discussion, had a panel assembled that talked about each of their agencies or organizations and their view and roles on migration corridors, designation, and issuing of oil and gas leases. So following that, then we reached out to what we call our community-based meetings, and we had the following week we had 5 community-based meetings throughout the state. On the 20th of February, we met in Green River. We had 25 members of the public come in and discuss migration corridors specific to the areas. And that's the focus of the community-based meetings, as contrasted to the statewide forum where we talked in much more broader general concepts. These community-based meetings, we drilled down specifically to the migration corridors for that specific geographic area. The next night we met in Kemmer and had about 30 members of the public. So again, a lot of interest. As you well know, we hear a lot of feedback on both our designation of corridors and our process and recommendations going forward when oil and gas leases are nominated, proposed for in and around these specific corridors. The third night we met over in Etna, over in Star Valley. A little smaller attendance. We had 9 people, but still some great discussion. And then to wrap up that week, we had meetings both in Pinedale and Saratoga. Pinedale, there was almost 50 people showed up to discuss migration corridor designation and management of those vital habitats. And then Saratoga, there were about 27. And this is consistent with the policy that you all approved back in 2016 when we have assembled the data specific to a migration corridor. Before we formally designate that corridor, we reach out to the local communities and share with them the data sets that were used for those designations. Well before we officially call that migration corridor. That's followed on the heels of a second public meeting where after the corridor is designated, then we again reach out on a local basis to talk about or to gather input on what we call our risk assessment. You know, what are the challenges? What are the opportunities associated with those corridors as far as management actions? And again, reach out to the public to get their input and their local knowledge of on the ground, years of experience watching these animals move across the landscape. So 2 different opportunities for publics to gather and meet with our field personnel and share their perspectives. And the month of February was very busy as far as that public outreach. Appreciate, I know Commissioner Schmid, former Commissioner Anselmi, was able to attend several of those. And we really appreciate the Commission's involvement and attention to these corridors as we move forward. But I just wanted to follow up with you this morning on the public outreach and the attendance and discussions. We're still taking written public comment if those individuals are so inclined. We've received about 13 letters to date. We'll take, obviously we take public input 365 days a year, but we asked specifically for this last round of meetings, if individuals had comments to submit those by April 1st. So there's still opportunities for us to receive written public feedback. In general, the feedback that, if I could summarize the input we received, the public was thankful that we took that opportunity to reach out to them to ask for their opinions. And I'm sure as you've got the pile of blue sheets there, there's still disagreement on our approach going forward on oil and gas leasing and our strategy for recommending to either BLM or OSLI on how to manage those corridors in relation to oil and gas leasing. As far as BLM, the second quarter oil and gas lease sale, we reviewed the EA. We made a recommendation for 4 deferrals on the second quarter BLM lease sale. 1 in the Sublette corridor, 3 in the Platte Valley corridor. If you recall, our recommendations center around a deferral if that proposed lease parcel overlaps a critical stopover habitat, or there's not enough space associated with that lease parcel outside the corridor to site that infrastructure so they can still pursue mineral extraction, but outside the corridor. Those instances occur where that space is lacking, then we ask for a deferral of that lease. And the BLM did support our recommendations for the second quarter and have deferred those 4 parcels that we recommended for deferral. With OSLI, they also agreed to defer 11 of their pending oil and gas leases. As Brian, Director Nesbitt, mentioned yesterday, they pulled 11 of those parcels that were nominated for their upcoming sale to provide us an opportunity to continue to work directly with OSLI to refine the stipulation that is in place right now. So those 11 will be deferred until July when their subsequent second sale of the year comes up. So it provides us an opportunity to sit down and renegotiate the verbiage in that stipulation.
Deferred with regard to a statement that may not be exactly the best word. They pull those parcels to allow us to have further negotiation.
Sure.
Like when you feel indifference, that seems to me to be a type of.
President Rael, Commissioner Craig, you're exactly right. So when I say deferral, very good point. A deferral for a BLM lease means that they are temporarily pulling that back until such time that they do develop a stipulation specific to that parcel. With the OSLI, it's just they just pulled them off the list temporarily to provide us that opportunity to re-engage in discussions. Thank you. So that's pretty quick and dirty update, and stand for any other questions. I know we have multiple members of the public here that'd like to address the commission. I will stand for any questions.
I just want to commend the department on those meetings. The kickoff meeting in February, I thought they were very well attended. Very beneficial.
I thought it was very good too. I stayed for a few moments. I didn't stay for the whole meeting. It was very productive, very conducive to the environment. And, we could have got the way that the department conducts their meetings now, the public input meetings, it's probably the best I've seen. Whether it be grizzly bear, whether it's wolves, whether your change, your regulation changes, or whether it be oil and gas and migratory routes. You guys have done a great job.
And Mr. President, going forward, we'll continue these community-based meetings going forward. We wanted to bring everyone that was interested together for a larger statewide perspective to try to get the level of understanding shared with a wide variety of constituents. So that's why we kicked that off with that larger Casper meeting. And then as we go forward, we'll obviously continue to our outreach at the community level where these corridors exist, getting that local input and any input from anyone that's willing to travel to whatever location that corridor lies.
Well, it's a hot, important, hot, contested on both sides of the subject. Yes. Any questions?
Thank you, Scott.
Moving on. Oh, I'm sorry, we've got a call to the public. I'd like to, excuse me, I'd like to remind the public 2 to 3 minutes. I'm not just looking at you, Brett and Derek. You did a great job, I think. In any event, we'll go ahead and start with Dave Feddersen. Dave is with the Mule Deer Foundation.
Good morning, President, Commissioners, Director Nesvik. I wanted to take this time to introduce myself as the new Regional Director for the Mule Deer Foundation in the state of Wyoming. Give you a little bit of an update on some of the activities that have been going on. We've been putting some hard work on the ground. Excuse me. Yesterday we had a meeting with Weatherby and we secured 4 Wyoming commemorative edition firearms that we're going to use to raffle off in the state of Wyoming. Leave the proceeds on the ground and direct them specifically to the Wyoming Migration Initiative project, along with a few other projects that I would like to get some input on what's going on in the state and try to truly build a program, turn some heads, and bring some members and volunteers with me as I do that. So I just wanted to take this time to thank you guys what you're doing. And if you can leverage me in your day-to-day operations, please feel free to call on me. If there's any questions, I certainly feel free to take them.
Mr. President.
Yes.
Not so much a question, but I just want to let the commission know that I personally know Dave. I was one of the organizing committee members of the wheel when we started our one-shot turkey hunt there. That's now its 11th or 12th year, but Dave was with Cabela's at the time, and I just want to let everybody know how instrumental this guy was in bringing Cabela's into that program, not only with gifts and prizes and video support and all kinds of stuff that he done to really get that project up off the ground and going. And it's a huge success because of a lot of the efforts that Dave made. He's a good hand, he's a hustler, and he's going to do a good job for the Mule Deer Foundation, something that they need. And, he's going to do good things for us. We'll work with him and help him.
Perfect. Thank you, Mike. Yeah, I'm going to try to leverage my relationships with my Cabela's network. I was with the NRA for a couple of years, so I've got some pretty broad networks out there, and it's time for me to start leveraging those. And if you guys can provide any support in the process, I would certainly be appreciative.
That's great. I think historically Deer Foundation hasn't committed, like they said they were in the past, if I'm not mistaken. All right, that?
That's kind of.
No, we got new blood standing up here now.
Yeah, and that's, I'm trying to find out what's went wrong in the past so I don't go down that path again and try to re-engage some of those people. I just launched a new chapter in Torrington. I've got Cheyenne coming online with the partnership with Weatherby. We're going to get a chapter launched in Sheridan too. So I'm going to bring some people with me as we grow this thing. I know there's some fences to mend and some bridges to build, but I've got broad enough shoulders and I'm up for the challenge. So I'm looking forward to it.
Just by you attending, and of course the kind words by Mike was one. So that's.
He's a pretty fair turkey hunter too.
Well, thanks. We have some pretty good hosts up there. Perfect. Thank you, folks. Look forward to working with you more closely.
Thanks for attending last night.
You bet.
Appreciate that. If I'd have known earlier, we would have hit you up for a license.
Sure, we can talk about it.
Okay. Next call to the public would be, or next person would be Steve Belinda. Belinda. Steve with the Mgt Foundation.
Yeah, my role's a little different. Sorry, Rebecca, I don't know if I screwed that up or not. I'm a consultant with the Mgt Foundation. I work on mostly the policy, government affairs, and the higher level stuff. So not new to Wyoming or to this commission, and I think many of you remember. And to answer your question, I asked that very question of Miles. He said we're all up to date of the promises that were made. That's what was made to me. But again, as Director Crank said, that's in the past. I come to you today to thank you and to commend the department and commission for the work you're doing on the migration initiative. I work at it at the highest levels down to the field level, and I can tell you Wyoming is by far out in front of this issue compared to every other Western state. And so to that extent, the Mule Deer Foundation has started a migration initiative, Migration and Winter Range. We're not quite sure how we're going to brand that. But our plan is to start in Wyoming, Colorado, and Montana to be a catalyst for increased funds hitting the ground. As Dave said with his rifle raffle, that we're going to be dedicating part of that fund to the ground. But we have put in recently, with the department's help, a request for $1.4 million for project work in the 5 migratory areas that were identified by the state per Secretarial Order 3362. And although those funds haven't been approved yet, we're pretty sure we're going to get a significant amount of the 1.4 request to put on the ground in Wyoming. There's also word that there's going to be upwards another $8 million coming from the federal government in the next fiscal year once the appropriation bills are done, directed at the migration initiative. So we'll be looking to get Wyoming even more money. And then finally, I just want to let you all know that as we work on this stuff, the word at the highest levels interior is they're going to do what the states want. And so it's imperative that the state request funding addresses the needs either through this commission or the governor on policy issues, because former Secretary Zinke and current nominee for Secretary David Bernhardt really do want the states to lead on this issue. So again, thank you, and we look forward to working with you.
Thank you. And real quickly though, you mentioned 1.4 million.
Yes.
Was that monies that you applied for through the Mule Deer Foundation?
We applied through the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation. There was 2.7 million for this latest RFP. There was 22 projects submitted worth 6.2. So Wyoming, we worked with the department and submitted one request on behalf of Wyoming Game and Fish Department. And so as you can see, we were 1/6 of the request. And you know, the rumor mill, as it does in these things, says that we're going to be happy with the outcome. What that means, I'm not sure. So.
Good news. Thank you. Nate Dover.
President Real, Director Talbot, Commissioners. I'm sorry, Director Nesbitt. Old habit. My name is Nick Dobrich. I'm from Du Bois. Work for Theodore Roosevelt Conservation Partnership. We got a small mission saying guaranteeing all Americans a quality place to hunt and fish. So I think here in Wyoming, though, we're doing a pretty good job, and thanks for the leadership of the department on that. First, I guess I want to say congratulations to Director Nesbitt, President Real, and new commissioners. I'm looking forward to working with you. And mainly, I came up here to say thanks for what the department's been recently doing. You know, I came to the Casper meeting with a lot of suggestions, and it seems like a lot of those were adopted in terms of deferring for stopover areas, moving forward with designations. I know it's just not me, it's the department taking the leadership on that role. So I really want to say thanks to the work Scott and his team has been doing in terms of what he already announced. You know, moving forward with 2 more migration corridors, we support that. And we'd ask the department to move forward with more in a timely fashion as the data becomes available. The state lands pause, or whatever you want to call it, really supportive of that. And we submitted, a few of the sportsmen's groups submitted recommendations that I think we circulated to most people in our suggestions and how that good start to that stipulation from the state could be approved. And then the recent lease sale, just want to note, this is the first BLM lease sale that's not going to have a conflict with migration corridors. So, and that's in the past year. You know, we've been really debating this issue, and it's become fairly polarizing in terms of the path forward. But I just want to say thanks for that this is going to be the first lease sale that we don't have that conflict in. But clearly, industry could propose more leases, and this issue is not going to go away. So we continue to request that the BLM, and with support by the state, goes forward with a statewide amendment. So basically updating all the land use plans for the BLM has, so they recognize and able to conserve for migration corridors. And then also the Rock Springs RMP, which is ongoing, making sure there's a strong stipulation in that one. Ideally, I think it's best to defer until we get to that point, but we recognize that the challenge politically that's around this issue. And I think, as you guys have done with stopover habitats and recognizing those, if there is a mechanism to recognize the high use route. And I know Hull Sawyer gave a great presentation on the modeling and science behind that at the November Casper meeting, and he can speak a lot better to it than I can. But the way I see it is able to fine tune your recommendations. Right now, it's a really broad brush. Like you look at the Bags corridor, it's a lot of country out there. And the way the department's designating right now, it hasn't allowed necessarily for that fine tuning as I guess you have with the stopovers, but this is another tool that we see that can be utilized. And it's not just for deferrals or stipulations, but as Mule Deer Foundation spoke earlier, there's going to be a lot of dollars coming to the ground on projects. Here's another way where you can specify, basically get the most bang for your buck, and that puns intended, in terms of where you could apply the money towards. So you're not only going to benefit, as the policy stands now, it's 2 deer makes up the corridor, 2 or more deer. You could put money on the ground where you're going to affect 2 of the deer that's known migrating, or you could have put the money on the ground where there's 100+ deer migrating. So I think it's just a tool that the department should consider updating the policy on to recognize it. I know it was in the first draft and it got removed. But yeah, we're incredibly, as everybody knows in Wyoming, we're incredibly fortunate to have wonderful, great populations of wildlife, incredible hunting opportunities, and ensuring that we keep our migration corridors intact is going to make sure we keep those opportunities intact. So with that, thank you, and I'll stand for any questions.
Any questions? Mr. President, I'm going to push back a little bit. We've gotten past this 2 deer thing. In some statistical world, 2 deer traveling the same road 2 years in a row would lead to the declination of the migration corridor. Where the department is at today is we're going to take a look at every corridor, every lease, apply it all radio collar data says, but what our wardens, guys like Ralph, have observed for 100 years living in Arlington. And we're going to make sound decisions on corridors and leasing. So, and I think we do take into account high use traffic areas. So the department has been busting their behind to do this right, consistent with all the different ways we're pulled. I think we're darn close, and I think we're doing a great job. So I hope that's what I heard from you. I just, when I start hearing this 2 deer thing, again, you raise my blood pressure.
President, Commissioner Crank. No, I mean, that's why I came up here to say, I think the department's on a great trajectory. I'm just saying this is one more tool that potentially utilize. And then I don't want to go down the pathway of the discussion you guys had in January in Cheyenne in terms of how it's designated. All I'm saying is that this is one more thing that when they go to analyze projects, deferrals, any sort of management tool, any sort of management decisions can be another tool in the toolbox. So yeah, that's all I'm going to say.
The other thing I'd say, Mr. President, I come in, people like me, Wyoming Outdoor Council, so I'm in a group, so I get in trouble for doing this, but the conservation group side of this, and as well as the oil and gas side of it, because I think collectively through this process, we provided great information and thoughts to the department to allow the department to do its job effectively. So, you know, I guess it's the squeaky wheel gets the grease, and you folks have certainly squeaked. The gas industry has certainly squeaked, but I think collectively that process has led to a pretty darn good result, and I think it's getting better every day. And I think Brian has made significant efforts since he was nominated as director to reach out to all groups and say, okay, give me your insight and your thoughts. And so I commend you for doing that. I think you should keep doing it going forward, and we'll get this right. Everybody wants to see this right. No one wants to see the wildlife damage. So we're all on the same team.
President, Commissioner Crank, I think you're exactly right. And going back to comments made earlier about Wyoming being in the forefront, a lot of that is due because of the industry we have, and a lot of those dollars for putting collars on originally. The reason we discovered the red-nosed hoback migration and we're able to designate that properly is because of the dollars spent by industry. So I completely agree that it's a good balance. We're trying to strike a good balance between the two. And we're not anti-oil and gas, and I know they're not anti-wildlife. It's just finding the right balance and trying to get it right. So thank you.
Any more questions? I'd just like to add what Pat's saying. I think the direction we're going, we've talked about this many times. We're going to do whatever we can to protect, especially mule deer, the species across the state that is, for whatever reason, is getting hit from all different directions. So any little small piece that we can do, such as migration corridors, I wish we could spend more time on wildlife crossings on these highways, because we can get immediate results with our mule deer, pronghorn, and other big game animals. To me, that's what the focus really needs to be. But we're going to continue to work on these migration corridors because we need every little piece to help maintain our mule deer populations across the state. And an important one.
President, Commissioner Schmidt, yeah, I completely agree. And one thing that wasn't mentioned with the legislative update is there was another bill. We have the license plate bill now where I could, as a citizen, as a resident, could buy my license plate that goes to a wildlife conservation fund that will fund these projects. There was a bill in the legislature to give some dollars to that did not pass. So we're going to try to work on that in the interim as well to get those projects on the ground. The way we see it, it's a whole package. It's not just one or the other. So we got to get it right collectively, holistically, and just putting money on the ground isn't going to do any good if we develop completely their winter range or their habitat. They can't even get through it. So it's a collective project, and all efforts are beneficial. So thank you.
Thank you. Kristen Gunther? Hello again.
Hello again, Mr. President, members of the commission. I'll keep it very brief today. I just wanted to echo previous gratitude. We reached out to Director Nesbitt to express our gratitude early on, just around the OSLI deferrals. And we just wanted to take this opportunity also to express our gratitude and commend the department for the work there. To just hit pause for a little bit, make sure that we're all good with the stipulation, that it reflects, the needs as understood by the department for development, doing it right, and making sure that we're protecting our wildlife values. So just wanted to take this opportunity to express our gratitude for that. Let's do it for any questions.
Any questions?
Thank you.
Derek Farmer. Hello again, Derek.
Hello, members of the commission, Mr. President, Derek Farmer, Wyoming Hunters and Anglers Alliance. Just to be really brief, you guys have had, I believe, a very judicious approach in how you handle these designations. I support them, our organization supports them, and I did run over previously, so I wanted to keep it extra brief. We've had some great comments. I'd like to echo what Nick and Kristen both said with the OSLI. Great work by the department on that, and taking a new step to deferral or pushing pause. So thank you all.
Any questions? Your overall average is within the parameters. Nice. Wyoming Meadows?
President Real, Director Nesbitt, members of the commission. I'm Dwayne Meadows, Executive Director of the Wyoming Wildlife Federation. Again, great. Everybody's doing a good job on this, and it's a great discussion. I have one little concern that's kind of come up. As Mr. Belinda talked about Secretarial Order 3362, which is helped get that bunch of money he's got coming in. That's great. There's one community we're not talking about here, and they own about 55 to 60% of the land in the state. That's the ag industry. At the National Cattlemen's Association meeting in New Orleans, February 1st, there's a resolution by the National Cattlemen's, brought forth by the Nevada Cattlemen's, to ask for a rescinding of that secretarial order. Now that Secretary Bernhardt announced the North American Wildlife meeting in Denver that he was going to continue that secretarial order, which is great news. But he's then rescinded that. It's still sitting on his desk. Everything I understand is a lot of that pushback came directly from the Wyoming delegation. And so I ask all of us, me, the Wyoming Wildlife Federation, everybody else behind me, everybody up here, the Game Fish Department. I know that Brunmeyer had a little trouble with the ag industry at the kennel meeting. This can be a real positive thing for folks on private land. They sometimes get fences, get other things. We all know. As some of you up here, I feed cows every night, and they're out on my feed lines. I understand that conflict, and but also landowners make a lot of money out of hunters. So landowners think that's very important as well. I think all of us need to make a little effort to bring those folks into the conversation, because right now they're feeling like they're out of it. This is the message I want to bring in here. So any questions?
Any questions? Thank you. Thank you. Lee Livingston.
President Rayo, that is going to be for the next agenda item.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I guess we'll go to the next agenda item 21, which will be Commissioner Blacksmith acting as Blacksmith.
The commissioner, formerly and currently. My update,
Yes.
All right. So yes, we did meet Wednesday night here after all the activities of the commission meeting and the orientation Wednesday. We got a couple of things done. Mgt March is organizing committee members put together a draft set of bylaws for the new foundation. we went through those bylaws. We made a few minor adjustments in there, some things changed. She will have that back to us on the 1st of April. That draft copy, revised draft copy. We also went through each one of the organizing committee members was charged to provide at this meeting some ideas for potential board members. So we went through, everybody identified some folks that they felt were a strong board of directors for the new foundation. And we got a pretty substantial list of names. So those are the two main functions, two main goals of the meeting this month. Our next meeting is scheduled around, let me back up. Those potential board of director folks, we decided that each individual organizing member that had those contacts would go back to those folks, reiterate to them if they want to be involved in this foundation and the reasons for it, try to give us kind of a one-page letter of their reasons why they want to be involved. They'll have those to us by the 15th of April. Our next meeting is scheduled for the April 22nd, just before our season 7 meeting in Riverton. The organizing committee will go through those and whittle those down to the folks that we want to sit down and actually talk to and try to put them on. Janet will also finalize our bylaws at that meeting. And then it's just a kind of waiting game until we get our 501c3 charter, which has been delayed because of the government shutdown. It's potentially going to be here by the 15th of May. It's probably going to be June time, in my estimation. But we'd like to have our board of directors kind of put together our bylaws in place. Once we get that charter, then we'll charge the board of directors, let them go and start the process to try to get some executive director at that foundation. Get it off the ground. So hopefully by midsummer, we've got things all packed up tight and moving down tight in one direction. So that's kind of the goal right now. You guys got anything else to offer? Something I forgot?
I just wanted to point out that this foundation is a project-oriented foundation. This is not going to be a foundation where it's going to pay for rank and file game and fish budgetary items. It's really going to be a project-oriented foundation. And it's going to define what it is, get funding for it, and do it. I think you're going to see this foundation start picking up a little speed here. We spending our real estate in 501c3. We can't do too much to really help it. I think you're going to see that this is going to start cranking up really quick.
Mr. President, Mr. Smith, do you? So if anyone out there has influence over the IRS, I'll give you the money covered under column project to give us our 501c3 status. So we can get those.
Any questions from anybody? All right. So, yeah. Thanks, Mrs. President.
We have a call to the public again.
Good morning. President Rael, members of the commission, Director Nesbitt. I'd like to congratulate President Rael and our new commissioners. Welcome aboard and looking forward to working with you. I'd like to congratulate Director Nesbitt on his position. We obviously have a long-standing relationship with him, looking forward to many more years. I'm standing in front of you. I've stood in front of you wearing a couple different hats. Today, I'm just standing in front of you as Lee Livingston. Wanted to visit with you about the foundation. I think it's a great idea. On the county level, we have a couple of different foundations that allow folks to contribute to projects with our library board, our fair board, and we wind up not having to spend or tax dollars that we're not able to spend. So it's a great idea, and I again congratulate you on moving it forward. I've had a funding idea that I think is ready-made. I know I visited with a couple of you privately about it, and I know you visited with yourselves about it, but each of you obviously have your commissioner licenses that are donated to various organizations. And I think it's a ready-made funding source. A portion of those, the sale of those licenses, if it could come back directly to the foundation. I don't know about the legality of that. That's something that could be explored. But I think it's actually, I think it's worthwhile pursuing. I realize there might be some pushback from some of the organizations that you donate to, but these organizations are, many of them, relying on that funding, and it's a source of funding that a few years back wasn't at the level it is. I remember in the first few years of my career as an outfitter, I remember buying a commissioner license for $1,000 to $1,500, and now I know of one that I think I've seen some sell for over 20,000. Kind of the going price on them now is, you'll see buy it nows for 12 to 15,000. So it's a funding source that has greatly increased over the last several years. So I would find it hard to believe that a lot of these organizations wouldn't be supportive of this and willing to donate back, for lack of a better term. And I would encourage the foundation, and you as personally on your own level, to reach out to some of those organizations, just get their feelings about it before we say it doesn't work, can't work, or won't work. Let's see what they have to say. I can speak, I guess I'll put on my Wyoga hat and say I can speak for Wyoga. We've got the president sitting behind me, that Wyoga would have no problem at all in sending some money back to support some wildlife projects in this state. And with that, I'll stand for any questions.
Mr. President, if someone's still out there doing buy it now, probably not consistent with statutory scheme, but people beyond the buy it now for $12,500.
Point taken, Commissioner Crank.
But I do believe there was 2 licenses sold recently in January and early February. I think they were raffled. One brought 29,000.
Yes. President Rael, there's definitely definitely a fair amount of money out there being generated from the generosity of this commission.
Building fanatics, Mr. President, regularly getting about 30 grand.
Marketing well.
Marketers of the license.
And that's Joshua Corsi.
Joshua Corsi. Dan Fagel out of Fox Springs.
One more big. I brought that up. It's foundation. It's moving forward.
And all of them need money. Thank you. Thank you, President Rael, and the commission.
You bet. We're going to hold on and give the opportunity to the Dick's Sporting Goods to represent themselves again if possible, if they're there.
President, that's Joey Fagel, Josh, of course. I'm going to call my names. They'll be at the music center.
Great. I don't see anybody in attendance here from Dick's Sporting Goods.
Here, Mr. Kevin Beers here.
Last call, Kevin Beers. Once, twice. What's the next step?
Mr. President, I made a motion second, so there's a motion, a proper second to vote their license authorization, or to support the department's position to do that. So I think we call for the question to take a vote.
And it was seconded by Commissioner Bagley, or you do?
That's all on the record already. On behalf of all the record.
Call to the question then, whether or not he set the recommendation by Greg Pitts and the department on behalf of in regards to Dick's Sporting Goods start losing their authorization to sell license. Call to the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? The ayes carry. Thanks, Greg. So, Rebecca,
Mr. President, I would like to say one thing before we start.
Absolutely.
So I sent this email on to the records office and put this program together. It's not my idea. This idea came from Penny Morgan. And what I found out is after I thanked Penny for that, she said, well, it wasn't her idea, it was Chris Baldwin. So I want to make sure the credit goes where credit's due. These guys threw the idea at me, and I just thought it was a great idea. So I think it would be a nice thing for us to do after every commission meeting, because based on the seasons, just put something together like this. It's just so common. All of us in this room have different views and opinions on many different things, but one common thing we have is Wyoming's wild critters and wild places. Similar you have in the state. So I just think it would be a nice way to finish this commission meetings by coming up with an idea and wrapping it up with some of the beauty stories that we all enjoy. That brings us all together. So thank you guys.
Excellent. Mr. President, Commissioner Schmidt, thanks so much for that. And my mind's already going on how we can engage the public and soliciting those images. So, but what we have today is the photo contest is part of the Wyoming Wildlife Magazine. And every year, every February, we get to publish some of the best images from Wyoming. And this year we had a record-breaking 3,000 images sent in, and part of that contest is they have to be based in Wyoming, and we have judges that verify the location the best they can. And we had participants from over 39 states this year with that contest. So we were fortunate enough to have that contest that those images also go into the November calendar, which is also part of our Wyoming Wildlife subscription. So enjoy these images. We've got the winners from this year's photo contest highlighted here amongst other images per request of the public. They just want to see more great photos. So enjoy.
ACDC would help.
It does have some music, but we may be having some technical difficulties.
why we live here.
Yeah.
Mike, great idea.
I wish I could put granted. Great idea.
Mike, great idea.
Mr. President, yes, I would like to say this is one of my favorite things is to get this issue of the Wyoming wildlife, along with the beautiful, wonderful photography. I think the narrative along with those photos is almost to understand how they were taken, where they were taken, and the effort was put into them to get those photos.
That's a good point. Chris, can you and Penny stand up, please? In case people don't know who you are.
Thank you for, the idea was after the last election, we had the great slideshow with all the hunting success that was made. Recognize photographers and beautiful places.
You know, there's another gentleman that's not here that has nothing to do with this, but I wanted to comment. Penny, please, could you please stand again? So I'd like to comment on Steve Martin and Penny Maldonado. They travel far and abroad. Steve used to live down in Kimmerer. He lived in Rock Springs now, but the amount of time that they spend, Penny lives in Jackson, so the amount of time that they spend traveling to attend these day and a half, 2 day meetings, maybe 3 days, kudos to you. And although we don't agree on everything, we can agree that the Wyoming Game Fish Department is striving forward to the benefit of all of Wyoming. And that's something we can agree on. And thank you for always attending. Steve, he's not here, he had to leave. Thank you for all the public input that we've done. So, that being said, Mike, well done. Thank you.
Provided.
We probably should. So the public is informed.
So yeah, this afternoon, this is the end of the formal commission meeting, but as the department does when we have new commissioners, and as we did on Wednesday, we will continue with some presentations this afternoon for the new commissioners and also some of the seasoned commissioners, those that wish to stay, to provide them more information about the department. And this afternoon will be overviews on communications as well as the 4 divisions, I believe. Mm-hmm. That's division overviews this afternoon. So that's the plan for this afternoon. There's no reason why we couldn't start probably at 12:30.
Mr. President. Mr. President, should do a final call to the public and see if anyone else.
So we just decided.
Thanks, Matt. One last call to the public. I'd like an opportunity to speak to your commissioners and the department.
I would move that we adjourn our regular scheduled convention.
Second. Sherry, it was moved by Commissioner Pat Crank, seconded by Commissioner Mike Smith. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, thank you. Travel safe, everybody. See you next.